So very often as a leader, we have to communicate across a range of different events, different meetings, different formats, and we need to personalize our communications. It can be helpful sometimes to have a consistent style, to build that trust, to build that certainty of who you are and what you're about as a leader. But very often, when we're trying to influence and engage with different audiences, we need to adapt. And I know that, for example, this was something I had to learn in my leadership career. And I know sometimes as leaders, we can struggle with that sometimes. So I'm just going to give you a few tips about how you can do this. You can still be yourself, but it's about using different approaches. So we might be comfortable with a particular style. So I'll give you a personal example. Generally, I'm quite an animated speaker. I speak quite quickly and I use my hands a lot. Now, even in my one-to-one client meetings, if I notice someone doesn't have that style, I will adopt that. I will adapt it. Perhaps I'll use less body language or body movements, gesticulations. So I will adapt my style, and the same in different speaking opportunities. If it's a more reserved audience, a more factual audience, I might use more jargon. So sometimes we have to be able to be prepared to adapt our style. Now, this is where disc profiling can be really, really helpful, because it gives you almost a diagnosis of how you tend to communicate. And sometimes we can habitually use the same methods, the same mannerisms. Again, we want to be ourselves, but sometimes you just have to adapt. So, for example, some of these key tips might help you. Know your audience. It's going to be very different if you're speaking to a very technical function than it is if you're presenting a broad strategy, perhaps to a board of directors. If you get nervous, as many of us do when speaking, I'm always learning, I'm always trying new things, then prepare 3 key messages so that if all else fails, you can come back to those 3 key messages. Perhaps have a couple of examples and statistics there. But for any presentation, just have those 3 key messages to hand. And then adjust your tone. As I mentioned, if you're speaking to a technical audience, you may be able to use more jargon, and that's absolutely fine, because it's almost that inbuilt language that you have within the department. But adapt for a broader audience, or for an audience that you don't know and won't understand those technical details. So those are just a few tips there about how you can diagnose your leadership communication style, and a few tips there on how you can adjust and adapt your communication style as a leader. If you'd like to know more, get in touch.